Some women in the Ottoman Empire chose hunger over food, silence over family, and pain over comfort, believing suffering was the only way to reach God. They locked themselves away, starved their bodies, and endured rituals meant to break the human mind. Why would anyone choose a life designed to destroy them, and how did they survive it? Pain, hunger, silence, isolation. For most of human history, people ran from these things. But for some, suffering was not something to escape, it was something to embrace. Asceticism is the belief that the human body is a distraction, and that true spiritual power can only be reached by denying physical needs. Food, sleep, comfort, pleasure, all seen as obstacles between the soul and the divine. Across ancient civilizations, ascetics believed that the more the body suffered, the closer the spirit came to truth. They believed pain cleansed the soul, hunger sharpened faith, silence opened a door to God. This idea did not belong to one religion or one culture. It appeared in Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, and Islam. But the way asceticism was practiced depended on where you lived and who you were. For men, asceticism often meant public recognition. Hermits, monks, holy men, respected, recorded, remembered. But for women? Asceticism usually happened in silence. No grand titles, no written praise, no statues, only discipline, only endurance. In the Ottoman Empire, female ascetics existed in the shadows of history. They were not always called saints. They were not always celebrated. Some were admired. Some were feared. Many were forgotten. They chose or were pushed into a life where survival itself became a test of faith. And this raises a powerful question. Why would a woman choose hunger over nourishment, isolation over family, pain over comfort? To understand that, we must first understand the world these women lived in. The Ottoman Empire was one of the most powerful empires in history. It stretched across 3 continents. It ruled over millions of people. It lasted for more than 600 years. From the outside, it looked glorious. Massive mosques, golden palaces, bustling markets, powerful sultans. But daily life depended heavily on who you were and whether you were male or female. For most Ottoman women, life followed a narrow path. Marriage, childbirth, household duty, obedience. Religion shaped everything, from daily routines to social expectations. A woman's honor was deeply tied to modesty, silence, and self-control. Faith was not just belief, it was identity. But opportunities for independence were rare. Education was limited. Public life was restricted. Personal choice was often shaped by family decisions. For some women, religion became the only space where inner power was possible. Spiritual devotion allowed women to step outside normal expectations without openly rebelling against society. A woman who devoted herself fully to faith could avoid marriage. She could refuse worldly roles. She could exist beyond traditional family structures. But this freedom came with a cost. Female piety in the Ottoman world was expected to be quiet, disciplined, and extreme. Not loud sermons, not public leadership, but endurance. Suffering became a language, a way to show devotion without speaking. And for some women, that suffering went far beyond prayer. Ottoman female ascetics were not one single group. They came from different backgrounds, ages, and social classes. Some were young women who refused marriage. Some were widows who withdrew from society. Some were older women seeking redemption or spiritual closeness. A few came from noble families. Many came from poverty. What connected them was not wealth or status, but belief. They believed that the body must be controlled, punished, and reduced so the soul could rise. Some lived near mosques or religious lodges. Others stayed inside small rooms for years. A few lived almost completely alone. Unlike male ascetics, these women rarely traveled or preached. Their devotion happened indoors, hidden from public view, and that made them easier to erase from history. Many followed Sufi-influenced practices, which emphasized inner purification and detachment from the material world. But unlike organized religious orders, female asceticism was often informal. No official rules, no protection, no written record. Everything depended on discipline and endurance. Some women chose this life. They believed suffering was holy. They believed pain brought clarity. They believed the body was the enemy of the soul. But others were guided strongly by religious mentors, family expectations, or social pressure. A woman who rejected marriage might be praised for devotion, but also isolated. A woman who fasted excessively might be admired, but also left alone to suffer. And once the path of asceticism began, turning back was not always possible, because to stop suffering could mean shame, failure, loss of spiritual identity. So they continued, through hunger, through exhaustion, through silence. They trained their bodies to obey belief, even when survival itself was at risk. And this leads us to the most disturbing part of their lives. What exactly did they endure? In the next part, we step inside their hidden world, where isolation was a ritual, silence was a rule, and human contact slowly disappeared. For Ottoman female ascetics, devotion did not begin with prayer. It began with disappearance. Isolation was not accidental. It was intentional. It was ritualized. Many of these women slowly removed themselves from society, first from public gatherings, then from neighbors, eventually even from family. Some lived in small rooms attached to mosques or religious lodges. Others stayed in back chambers of family homes. A few were given tiny, windowless spaces, barely larger than a closet. Once inside, the world outside faded away. Days passed without conversation. Weeks passed without visitors. Months passed without human touch. Silence became both discipline and test. In Ottoman spiritual belief, silence was powerful. Words were seen as dangerous, capable of inviting ego, pride, or temptation. By remaining silent, a woman proved she had conquered her desires. But the human mind is not built for isolation. Modern psychology shows that prolonged solitude can distort time, memory, and identity. Ottoman women had no scientific explanation for what they experienced, only spiritual interpretation. If they heard voices, they believed it was divine. If they lost sense of time, they believed they were transcending the world. If their minds fractured, they called it spiritual awakening. Isolation erased personal identity. Names became unimportant. Past lives felt distant. The self dissolved into ritual. And once isolation became normal, returning to society felt terrifying. Some women lost the ability to speak comfortably. Others felt overwhelmed by sound and light. Many developed intense emotional detachment. To survive isolation, they turned inward. Prayer replaced conversation, memory replaced presence, faith replaced reality. But isolation was only the beginning, because once the world was removed, the next enemy was the body itself.
Food is the most basic human need, and that is exactly why it became the most powerful sacrifice. Ottoman female ascetics practiced extreme fasting, far beyond what religious law required. Some ate only once every few days. Others survived on bread and water alone. Some fasted for weeks, breaking their fast only when their bodies collapsed. Hunger was not seen as weakness, it was seen as victory. In spiritual belief, hunger silenced desire. It humbled the body. It forced obedience. As the stomach shrank, so did worldly attachment. But hunger does not disappear. It transforms. At first, hunger brought pain, then dizziness, then hallucinations. Many women reported seeing light, hearing whispers, feeling divine presence. In reality, their bodies were starving. Muscles weakened, organs slowed, immune systems failed. But these symptoms were not treated as danger signs. They were treated as spiritual milestones. The weaker the body became, the purer the soul was believed to be. Some women lost the ability to menstruate. Others developed permanent digestive damage. Many died young. Those who survived often did so because someone quietly intervened. A neighbor left food outside the door. A family member disobeyed orders. A religious guide allowed small exceptions. But even mercy had limits. Eating too much could mean failure. Enjoying food could mean sin. So hunger became constant. And over time, hunger changed the mind. A starving body cannot think clearly. It becomes obedient, desperate. And that obedience was mistaken for spiritual discipline.
Sleep is the body's way of healing, so ascetics learned to deny it. Many Ottoman female ascetics stayed awake through the night to pray. Others slept only a few hours on hard floors, without pillows or blankets. Comfort was forbidden. Some believed that sleeping too deeply invited temptation. Others believed exhaustion weakened the ego. So they trained themselves to stay awake, night after night. Fatigue blurred reality. Time lost meaning. Dreams invaded waking life. Thoughts slowed. In this state, women experienced visions. Some felt they were floating. Some felt watched. Some believed they were receiving divine messages. But prolonged sleep deprivation is dangerous. It weakens the heart. It damages the brain. It breaks emotional regulation. Mood swings became common. Anxiety increased. Depression deepened. Yet these effects were not recognized as harm. They were seen as signs of surrender. The body was losing control, and that was the goal. Because in ascetic belief, a controlled body meant a liberated soul. But the truth was darker. The human body can endure only so much. And as isolation, hunger, and exhaustion combined, many women reached a breaking point. Some collapsed in prayer. Some became ill beyond recovery. Some quietly disappeared from history altogether. And still, the rituals continued, because suffering had become sacred. In the next part, we explore the most disturbing belief of all, the idea that pain itself was holy, and how physical suffering became a spiritual weapon against the body. For Ottoman female ascetics, pain was not an accident. It was a tool, a language between the body and the soul. Many believed that pain burned away sin, that physical suffering weakened temptation, that endurance proved devotion more than words ever could. Some women exposed themselves to extreme cold, refusing warmth even in winter. Others stood or knelt in the same position for hours until their legs trembled and collapsed. Some pressed their bodies against hard surfaces during prayer, denying comfort entirely. These acts were rarely dramatic or public. They happened quietly, behind closed doors. Pain was not meant to be seen, it was meant to be felt. In their belief system, comfort was dangerous. Pleasure distracted the soul. Pain sharpened it. But pain changes the brain. Prolonged suffering floods the body with stress hormones. Over time, it dulls emotional response. Fear fades. Sensitivity disappears. Many women described reaching a point where pain no longer frightened them, and that terrified those who observed them. Some religious mentors praised this endurance. Others worried it had gone too far. But there were no clear limits. Pain had become proof. The more a woman endured, the more spiritually advanced she was believed to be. And so the rituals intensified. Because once pain became holy, there was always a reason to endure more. The human body is resilient, but it is not invincible. Isolation, starvation, sleep deprivation, and pain push the body toward collapse. So how did any of these women survive? Some survived through adaptation. The body slowed its metabolism, muscles weakened to conserve energy, heart rates dropped. Others survived because they were never completely alone. Despite official isolation, small acts of kindness happened. A bowl of soup left quietly at a door. A neighbor pretending not to notice. A family member visiting in secret. Even the strictest systems bent at the edges. Some religious guides allowed exceptions, small amounts of food, brief rest, moments of contact. Not because they rejected asceticism, but because death served no spiritual purpose. Yet many women did not survive. Historical records are incomplete, names are missing, ages unknown. Women simply disappeared. Those who survived carried lifelong damage, chronic illness, weak bones, impaired memory, emotional numbness. And still, many believed the sacrifice was worth it, because belief can overpower instinct. When faith defines identity, survival becomes secondary. And this brings us to how society viewed these women. Were they admired or feared? Ottoman society had a complicated relationship with female ascetics. Some people revered them. They were seen as holy women, closer to God, untouched by worldly desire. People sought their prayers. Families whispered their names with respect. Rumors spread of miracles and visions. But admiration came with discomfort. A woman who rejected family life challenged social norms. A woman who ignored physical needs unsettled others. A woman who embraced suffering made people question their own faith. Some feared these women, not because they were powerful, but because they reminded society of uncomfortable truths. That devotion could demand too much, that faith could consume identity, that holiness could destroy the body. And because female ascetics lived quietly, without institutions or official protection, they were easily erased. No biographies, no official recognition, no lasting monuments. When they died, many left nothing behind, not even records of their names. History moved on. Empires rose and fell. Wars were remembered. Sultans were recorded. But the women who endured pain in silence were reduced to whispers. And yet their legacy remains, hidden inside stories, traditions, and unanswered questions. In the next part, we separate myth from reality and uncover how later generations misunderstood, exaggerated, or completely erased the truth of Ottoman female asceticism. Over time, stories about Ottoman female ascetics changed. Facts blurred, silence created space for imagination, and myths slowly replaced reality. Some later accounts described these women as mystical figures with supernatural powers. Others reduced them to symbols, pure, emotionless, almost unreal. Both versions missed the truth. Ottoman female ascetics were not legends. They were human beings. They felt hunger. They felt fear. They felt doubt. The idea that they never struggled is a myth created by distance. Another myth is that all ascetic women were forced. That is also not entirely true. Some women chose this path sincerely. They believed deeply that suffering brought meaning. They felt empowered by rejecting social expectations. But choice did not exist in a vacuum. When options are limited, devotion can become the only acceptable escape. A woman who did not want marriage had few choices. A woman without family support had fewer. Religion offered purpose, but demanded proof. Another myth is that these practices were officially encouraged. In reality, Ottoman religious law often warned against excess. Many scholars discouraged extreme fasting and self-harm. But what happened behind closed doors was difficult to regulate. Female asceticism existed in the space between belief and silence, where rules faded and endurance took over. The truth is more complex than legend. These women were neither saints nor victims alone. They were individuals navigating faith, pressure, identity, and survival. And that complexity is what history often ignores. So we return to the most difficult question. Did Ottoman female ascetics choose this life, or were they controlled by it? The answer is not simple. Some women actively sought suffering. They believed it freed them from worldly roles. They felt closer to God than they ever had before. For them, asceticism was power. But for others, devotion grew from pressure. Family expectations, religious authority, social honor. A woman praised for endurance might feel trapped by that praise. Stopping meant disappointment. Eating meant guilt. Resting meant failure. Belief became obligation. And once identity was built around sacrifice, letting go felt impossible. This is where devotion turns dangerous. When faith no longer brings peace, but fear of stopping. When suffering becomes the measure of worth. Ottoman society did not force all women into asceticism, but it rewarded those who endured the most. And reward can be a powerful form of control. The line between choice and pressure blurred, not because women were weak, but because the system was powerful. And understanding that helps us see these women clearly, not as symbols, but as humans caught in forces larger than themselves. Female asceticism in the Ottoman world did not end suddenly. It faded slowly. As the empire changed, so did religious life. Modernization introduced new ideas about health, education, and women's roles. Urbanization weakened isolation. Medical knowledge challenged extreme fasting and sleep deprivation. Society began to question suffering as virtue. Religious practices became more structured. Excess was discouraged. Public awareness increased. Women found new paths to identity: education, charity work, social engagement. Faith no longer required disappearance. Extreme asceticism became rare and then almost invisible. But disappearance does not mean erasure. Traces of these women remain in stories, traditions, and cultural memory. They remind us of a time when belief demanded everything. And as we move into the final part of this story, one question remains. What do these women mean to us today? The story of Ottoman female ascetics is not just about the past. It is about how humans understand devotion, control, and worth. These women lived centuries ago, but the forces that shaped their lives have not disappeared. Even today, people are taught, sometimes quietly, that suffering proves value, that endurance equals virtue, that silence equals strength. Ottoman female ascetics remind us how easily belief can turn the body into a battlefield. They lived in a world where a woman's choices were limited, where respect came at the cost of self-denial, and where faith became the only language of power. Their suffering was not meaningless, but it was also not inevitable. Their lives force us to ask difficult questions. When does devotion stop being faith and become harm? When does discipline become destruction? And who decides how much suffering is enough? These women did not write books. They did not leave manifestos. They left traces, quiet ones. In their endurance, we see the human capacity to survive even the harshest conditions. In their silence, we hear a warning, because when suffering is praised too much, pain becomes invisible. For a long time, history treated these women in extremes, either as saints beyond human weakness or as victims without agency. Both views are incomplete. Ottoman female ascetics were human beings. They doubted, they feared, they hoped. Some found peace in their devotion. Some found only endurance. Some found neither. They deserve to be remembered not for how much they suffered, but for what they reveal about human resilience. Their bodies endured hunger. Their minds endured isolation. Their spirits endured a world that gave them few choices. Remembering them honestly means rejecting romantic suffering. It means honoring belief without glorifying pain. It means recognizing that faith should give life meaning, not take life away. So we return to the question that began this story. How did they survive? They survived because belief can be stronger than instinct, because the human mind can override the body, because identity can be built around endurance. They survived because suffering was not random. It was structured, ritualized, and justified. But survival came at a cost. Broken bodies, shortened lives, forgotten names. History remembers empires, wars, and rulers, but true strength often lived elsewhere, in small rooms, in quiet hunger, in women who disappeared from the world so completely that even history almost forgot them. Their survival was not heroic in the way legends describe. It was human, and that is what makes their story matter. Because when we listen closely to the past, we don't just learn what people believed, we learn what they endured. And sometimes the most powerful stories are not the loudest ones, but the ones told in silence.